press live.
Yep, go for it.
Morning everybody, kia ora. It's a bit of a cooler day today. It's going to be only 13 degrees centigrade today, whatever that is Fahrenheit. So we're staying in, keeping warm and quilting today. Say hi if you're here, so we know you're here.
Nobody's here yet.
Nobody's here yet.
Now we got somebody.
Oh yes. Morning everybody. We'll just stay online and get people to, we'll wait for a few people to join before we get started.
We got a few now.
Good morning. Say hi, where are you from? Good morning everybody.
Let's go.
Okay, let's get a start. Hi, I'm Sheila Christensen. This is our third class in the Back to Basics quilting lesson. As you can see, I've finished my quilt top. Yay! So I've done all my squares, put the vertical sashings, the horizontal sashings, and the borders around. So this is the point at which we're going to layer the top, the backing, and the batting. But to show you more easily, I've made some smaller samples so that I can show on the desk here. We're doing this on our table here. So I've made a couple of cushion covers.
Good morning, everybody. Hi, Mary. Hi, Rhonda.
Hi.
Hi, Trish.
Hi, everyone. So here's our quilt sandwich, as they call it. You start with your backing fabric. So that goes down with the right side down, wrong side up. Then you've got your batting, and then you put your quilt top on top. And what we've done here is I've put some masking tape on because you want this to be flat but not stretched. So the masking tape, if you've got a table big enough that isn't your poshest dining room table that you don't want to scratch, you can actually tape this to your table. So you can see here, so what I want to do is make sure I'm not getting any wrinkles.
Morning, Jill.
Good morning, Jill. How's Greytown? So there we go. So I'm going to stick that on. My first ever beginner quilt, I actually basted on the floor, on loop pile carpet, which was a real pain. So as some quilters say, they always make sure they buy, if they're buying a new carpet, they don't buy loop pile because your pins get caught in it. So I'm just taping this down just to hold it in place. Obviously, with me doing a small item, usually I would probably use an iron-on fusible batting or do it fairly quickly, but this is going to hold it nice and flat.
It's quiet in Greytown.
Quiet in Greytown. Yeah, it's quiet here too. Not a lot of traffic at the moment. So I'm using these quilters safety pins, which have a little curve on them, and that curve helps you actually pin it while it's on flat on the table. You always start in the centre and work outwards, so any creases and things get smoothed outwards. And the idea is to have your pins no more than your fist apart. If you ever have pinned a quilt wider than that, you'll discover why that is, because you will get creases and things happening. So we're just going to show you how we do this pinning. So we're sort of pinning through there. Usually when people are doing this for the first time, they go, well, how do you know that it's going through all the layers? You just do. I've not had a problem with them not going all the way through. So basically the idea is you're pinning the whole thing and no more than about a fist apart. If you don't have these pins, you can do it with a needle and thread. Just a household needle is fine. And you would start in your centre and make really big stitches. So it can be done quite quickly. Oops, I've unthreaded my needle. Sometimes I do a really long piece of thread and I might work one way with one needle and the other way with the other needle so that because if you're right-handed, you'll work to your left. Look at me, I threaded this before I said to Carl. This is so I don't have to thread a needle on live Facebook. And what do? So big stitches like this. So you can do it like that, and you would do it this way and then do it that way as well. And that will hold everything nicely in place for quilting. So when you're going to be quilting, you need to decide what thread you're going to use. So if you've got some threads, or you go to the shop and have a look at the different threads, the best way to choose is to open your thread out and just sort of pull it on the quilt. So I quite like that one. That's not too dark against here. Let's have a look at what a light one looks like. So if I chose one that's going to disappear against this background here, it's going to be really quite light on my darker squares. So I actually chose to go with a darker thread, which is very similar in colour to this, which is actually in my sewing machine at the moment. So it's going to sort of disappear on the squares, and it won't be too strong on here. This is a 50 weight thread. If you use a thicker thread, that's going to show up more, but it's your decision. You can decide that you actually want to see all your quilting, and if you do, you can go for a thicker thread, and I believe you do have a little quilt here. This one I used a 12 weight thread on. I had to go to a really big needle on my machine, but it worked. And that's so you can actually, I did blend the colour, but you can actually see the quilting stitches a bit more. So it's a bit more decorative if you go for a thicker thread. Okay, let's go over and see what settings we need on our machine. Oh, before we go to the machine, we're going to have to mark our quilt. So where are we going to do our quilting lines? So there are various ways that you can mark. I've got a few things here. This one's very handy. This is a chalk wheel, which you can use with a ruler. So I'm actually, with this one, I decided what to do is to go about 1/2 inch away from this seam on either side. So I'll be going there and there and there and there. And then once I'd done that, I decided I needed to go through the centre as well, because these squares are quite big. Most battings will actually say how far apart they should be quilted. And the cotton, I think, can actually go up to 10 inches apart, but a lot of them will be 4 inches. 4 inches is pretty safe. What that does is it means that your quilt is not going to sag over time when it gets washed and so on. So with this one, I'm going to mark a line 1/2 inch away from this seam. And now that it's all pinned, she says, when it's all pinned, I can put my 1/2 inch line, you see this on the seam there, and that way I can see where I've got to start up there. So I can use this little chalk wheel, run that down like that, come down here, carry the line on. So that will give me a line all the way down. And that chalk will just rub off once it's all quilted. So those are really good for doing straight lines. There are a few other tools you can use. That's a thicker chalk pencil. You can get a very fine chalk ceramic pencil, and that you can get leads for that in different colours. So if you're marking on a darker fabric. I haven't got my friction pen with me. Friction markers, they will iron off, and the other things we've got are this one, which is a washout blue marker, which if you do embroidery you might have used for marking embroidery. That will come off with water. And this one is called a Hera marker. So let's try marking with this one, because I haven't really used these before. What these do is they actually crease your fabric. So you can see there, Can you see there? We've got a crease in the fabric. Let's try it on this here. A lot of people swear by these. So yeah, so it's a nice strong crease so that you can follow that, and then you're not worrying about getting any marks off after you've finished. You do have to do that on a really flat surface. So if you've had to baste out on your carpet, don't try and mark it on the carpet because it won't work. You need a good solid surface behind. So once we've got everything marked up, we can then go to the machine. Let's do it over here. So if you have a walking foot for your machine, do put it on there. If you don't, then I did do my first ever beginner quilt without a walking foot. You just have to go really slow. So I've got my walking foot on. The reason why you use a walking foot is you know that you've got these feed dogs underneath here, which normally they will move your fabric. But when you're quilting, you've got these 3 layers. So the walking foot has feed dogs on the foot itself as well. So that is going to grab both the top fabric and the bottom fabric, and it will feed them through at the same rate. So you get a nice even stitch. I'm going to set my stitch length. So I'm just using a plain stitch, and I'm going to change my stitch length up. I'm going to go for 3 on this one. You can go between 3, 3.5, 4. It's really what stitch you like the look of. So it's really good to do a practice before you start. So when you're going to start quilting, if you get a scrap of fabric and put it on the edge, and you do a little practice on here, that will make sure that you've got your sewing tensions right, you've threaded your machine right, you're happy with your stitch length and the colour of your thread and everything. So it's a really good idea to do that before you start. Let's grab my foot pedal. It's gone for walkies. And you need to make sure that your quilt is really flat and that you support the weight of the quilt. If you have your quilt dragging down on your lap, that's what's going to make your stitches go really short. So if you're ever quilting along and you find your stitches going short, it's because the weight of your quilt is sitting probably on your lap and pulling on here, and it only takes a little bit to fight with the needle and the feed dogs. So I'm just going to go, that sort of speed's quite good to start with. So it's called a walking foot because you're going to walk with it, not run. And that will help you make sure that every so often you're lifting your quilt and keeping the weight up. So there's a little practice there. So then I can look at my stitch. Yes, my tension's nice. I like my stitch length. It's looking good on the back and I'm all set to go. So you just, the main thing with this is just to take it slow, to try to keep the weight of the quilt up. So if you've got a table like this, it's great. If you haven't, what I used to do was use my L-shaped computer table, and I used to have my machine there, and then I could put the weight of the quilt over on that side. So some people will bring up an ironing board and put the weight of the quilt on the ironing board. It's whatever will support it and let the machine not have to fight with the weight of the quilt. So you can see that this one I have actually done. So I have followed my lines. I've gone down here, and I will put a diagram of where I've quilted mine. It's completely up to you what pattern you want to quilt on yours. So I've followed my lines down here. I've gone down the centre here, which is 3 inches from the outsides of my squares, right in the centre there. And then here, which is 1/2 inch. And to make it nice and easy, I've just gone all the way to the edge. If you do find yourself running out of bobbin thread or top thread part way down, what you do is when you start again, you'll actually hold this top thread, turn your wheel and pull. Your bobbin thread is going to pop up to the top. You see that there? I need my little tweezers. Oh, don't know where they've gone. Anyway, I'll use this little tool here. So you grab that thread from the bottom and pull it through so that when you start again, you've got both threads at the top. And the reason why you do that is you don't get a horrible rat's nest on the bottom. So then you just put your needle down again and you can start quilting again from where you stopped. Obviously, if you run out, you probably don't know you're going to run out, so it's just going to be loose. So if it ran out there, I'd probably start again just a couple of stitches before, and that way I know that those are going to be sewn in. When you've got these threads here to get rid of, basically what you do is put your finger in there, okay, tie a knot. So I've got my finger and thumb in the loop. I'm going to pull that through and put my needle in there. Put the tip of the needle down where it came out. Pull that like that. Okay, so now I've got a knot on the top. Don't be afraid to rerun the video on this. And then thread my needle with both of those. Yay. And then I'm going to go in there where it came out, along inside the batting. So about a half an inch to an inch, pull it through and tug. That little knot then gets into this gap here and it will lock the stitches in place. So then I can clip that. So then you've got a nice invisible join anytime you've had to change your thread. So there we go. So that's doing all the quilting. Once you've got all the quilting done, I'm just going to get rid of that little thread there. You've got your quilt sandwich and you've still got all this backing and batting around it. So we now need to trim this up, which we're going to do over here to take this off. Is anybody firing any questions at us yet?
No, they're just all asleep.
All asleep, just taking it all in, watching it all. Okay. Ta-da. Get my cutting mat. Now, where's my stick? There it is. So I'm going to now trim this up so that I can put my binding on. And when I'm trimming, you'll be glad now that you did your borders all beautiful and lined everything up, because you see you don't have to worry about any of these lines here. And also I can then put a line from my ruler on here, and it should, in theory, be the 2 1/4 line. Oh, it is. Goody good.
Yeah.
No, 2 1/4, because there's 1/4 of an inch seam allowance over here. Not the other way around. The white markings 2 1/4. They show up better.
Helen's soaking it up like a sponge.
Yay! Okay, so I often will go along, look at this line, see that it's on the seam. You see here, that's come off the seam a little. So if I tug on my quilt, there we go, and then press down, it's all straight. So then I can start cutting. Cut through there. Put this on the line here. Looking good up there. take those off. Dog bedding apparently, that stuff. Okay, so here, yep, that's working. Sometimes you'll find you have to use a different line. It's not the end of the world. Nobody's ever going to know that you had a slightly different seam size on your border. Two and a quarter. Two sides. You can see why we didn't do this with the whole quilt today. Okay, the other thing I'm doing is I'm checking, I've got a line up here, but the really important thing is that I'm straight on here, because then my corner will be square and that's going to make my binding really sit nicely. There. Last one. 2 1/4. I have to tuck that way this time, and then that way. There we go. There you go. That's all nicely square and ready for binding. So to make your binding, I've cut my strips. I quite like to do my strips 2 1/4. Some people do them 2 1/2. If you're doing something really small, you might want to do them a little bit smaller. It's what suits you, but this is 2 1/4 inches wide. Then I've joined them the same way we joined our sashings and things, so they're all joined. I've only used 2 strips for this, so I think you'll need 6 for your quilts. And then it's folded in half like this and pressed. So you get your binding all ready, and I just roll it up. Now I've done a little extra on this project because this is a cushion. I've actually made the back for my cushion here, so I'll just run through what I did here. I used some of my leftover fabrics, just joined the strips. I quite like to make it a little bit stronger on the back, so I've put some calico on the back there and just stitched that down and folded the edge over here. So I've got one that's going to overlap the other when I line them up against the edge of my cushion. And I got the buttonhole thing out on my machine yesterday. Then I had to tap on the window. Carl was in the garden. I went, I did a buttonhole, because I'm more of a quilter than a sewer. So I've made 2 buttonholes here, but you can join it with whatever you want, Velcro or poppers or ties. So I've made 2 buttonholes so that I can, and I actually found 2 buttons that matched, which was amazing. So I just need to trim these up to the right size before I put my binding on. Just on the on one side. So if I line up my sides where I've got it there. Okay, let's push my mat over a bit. Line that up. So I've just got to trim this off here, because my binding's going to hold everything in place now. There we go. Oops, just need to move this down a bit, which I can do because it's... There we go. Okay. So now to attach my binding, I'm going to leave a good 10 to 12 inches before I start. And I'm going to start halfway down one side. Because I'm doing this cushion, I'm actually going to start here where the 2 overlaps join. And pop a pin in there. And because I've got this back that's not really attached, I'm also going to pop a couple of other pins in for my cushion. This you don't have to do on your quilt, obviously, because you've already basted everything. But I don't want my corners to flap back when I'm sewing. Just pop a pin in that corner. Right, now we're ready to go and sew our binding on. Okay, so essentially what's going to happen is we're going to machine sew down here. This is going to fold over and it's going to come round to the back, and we're going to hand stitch it on the other side. So I want this to be a little bit less than 1/3 of the way across here. So I'm going to put my 1/4 inch foot on. You can do this with your walking foot and move your needle. It's up to you what works for you. So it's quite good to do little practices on this before you start. So, excuse me yawning, I'm actually going to set it a little bit more than 1/4 inch so that I've got room to fold it, because if I did a real 1/4 I'd probably have too much on the back. Somewhere between 1/4 and 3/8 is usually about right. I'm pushing this under here. I'll be a bit generous here. And this has gone back to my standard 1.8 stitch, so I'm going to increase that a bit because I've got a lot of layers to get through. So I'm going to make it 2.2 for me. Okay. Make sure my layers are all there.
Hi, Janet from Lincoln.
Hi, Janet. Is that Lincoln, Canterbury, or Lincoln, UK?
Or Lincoln, Nebraska.
Or Lincoln, Nebraska. Lincoln, Nebraska. See? So now I've stitched down a little way. I'm just checking that I've got my distance correct before I go all the way around. So I'm fold this back, fold it over, and it'll be just perfect because my binding will be full and I'm going to cover the stitches at the back. So that I'm happy with that distance there. I'm just going to mind my pin as I come down here. Take that out. Now, when you get to nearly the end, you want to make a mark 1/4 inch up. What have I got? I'll use my blue. So I've probably gone a bit far here, but 1/4 inch up from the end, roughly, is where my foot is there. So I'll make a little mark there. I'm going to actually stop at that point. The reason why I didn't mark that before I started is that everything squishes, so it would have moved by the time I got to this point here.
Is that a quilter's term?
Squishy?
Yeah.
Yep, definitely. There's all sorts of terms like that. Okay, so I've stopped about 1/4 inch before the end here. It's really the width that I've got here that I need to stop before here. Right, this is the magic bit. We're now going to fold this out to our right. So it comes out with a 45-degree angle here. This folding is what's going to make your sewing down nice and easy at the corners. So I'm trying to make sure I've got a nice straight across here. This is 45 degrees, and this 45 degrees comes out exactly at that corner there. Okay, so we folded it over, just finger press it down. Then we fold it straight back like this, so that that lines up straight down here. Okay, and then we're going to pop a pin in there. Like that. Then we turn. And we're going to start stitching from as close to the edge as our machine will allow us to do. Okay. This is where we go fast forward and go and sing the song and speed up the video so I can get all the way around. Dee, 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 dee.
Oh, is this my job?
Yep.
Too bad I don't sing very good this morning.
Okay. We'll let you off. We'll let you off singing duties. You'll have to sing for yourselves. Sing your own little songs.
Lincoln Christchurch.
Yes, Lincoln Christchurch, you see, not Lincoln, Nebraska.
So what size needle do you use for your quilting?
Good point. I've got a I've got a purple needle in. Do you know me, purple needle? Which is a 100? A 90 or 100 you would use.
Is it heavier or thinner?
Heavier.
It's a heavier one.
Heavier, yeah. So here's a little pack of Schmetz assorted needles. So those 75s I would use for piecing, and the 9014s I would use for quilting. So any thicker weight of fabric, you want a heavier needle. And you'd be amazed. You might think, oh, my little machine won't cope with that thick fabric, but it will, as long as you put the right needle in. So I'm going to measure this corner a bit earlier this time. That's easier. Little mark. I don't have to fasten anything because it's going to get sewn over. So fold out. This is a nice straight line along the bottom here, 45 degrees, that's nice and straight. Fold it back. It's worth taking the time to get this right because you'll thank yourself later. So I want to know what you guys want to learn. Do you want to learn to do traditional blocks with half square triangles? Do you want to learn to do applique? What sort of things do you feel like you want to learn in quilting? Coming up to this one. Mark here.
Yes to applique, yes, especially on stitch size.
Right. Machine applique then.
Traditional blocks.
Yep. So what we do in the shop, we actually, when people have made this beginner quilt, they often go on to do our sampler. And that sampler covers lots of different techniques. So we do applique, we do traditional blocks. We start with easier traditional blocks and we go on to harder ones. So we'll have a think about what we're going to do next time. Next week, we don't really know what's happening yet because we may be getting ready to come out of lockdown, depending on what Jacinda says on Monday, our Prime Minister. So we've been told that we'll know next Monday whether we're coming out of lockdown into what they call level 3 sometime during next week or later next week. And if we are, then we'll probably have to be in the shop getting things ready, because we won't be able to act normally. We won't be able to run classes in the shop. So we have to be thinking about how we're going to do it. We'll be doing online at that point, and probably curbside pickup and possibly local deliveries. But I'm quite enjoying doing these classes, so we might try to carry on doing something like this once we get back in the shop. We do have a lot of customers that can't get to us all the time. So, okay, this is my last corner. With this last one, I'm not going to come down very far. I'm just going to make sure my corner's settled. Now you've got longer sides on your quilt, so you'll be able to go a little bit further on your last corner. Okay. So I've stopped and I'm leaving myself a decent gap, because that makes it easier to join everything. So here's my little trick for making sure that your join
So how
is
far apart
mitered.
is that really?
So this is about
really tell.
8 inches.
Put your ruler against it, please.
Yeah, the more you can leave, the easier it is, really, is the rule with that. We are... I always look at this because I have to measure from the other side. That's actually 7.5. That's probably just about enough. So I'm going to take this right hand side over to about halfway along the gap, and I'm going to fold it up like that and finger press it so it's vertical. And this one is going to come from the left, and I'm going to fold it down. There's a little bit of fiddling to do here. Up like that and down like that. Okay, so they're meeting. You see that's meeting there, and I'm finger pressing both of them. Okay. Often I do this at the ironing board. Now what that's done is that's marked where that seam is going to be, and so that when I open this out, can you see this V here? You can see that, okay. So on this side I've also got a V, so that point of that V meets the point of that V. Okay, so this is how we put our pieces together in the first place. We did the left hand one over the right hand one, but this just shows us where they meet up. So as you can see, the more room you've got here, the easier it is. So now I'm going to pin this. And then I'll get my hands out of the way and show you. So I've got my right hand piece on the bottom, okay, and I've got my left hand piece coming straight over it, and I used my folding to find the right point where they meet. So now I can sew from up here to down here.
Quarter-inch seam?
No, just a line.
On the
So
press.
we're actually going on this line.
On the press.
Yeah. If you press it with the iron, you'll get a better line to follow. And at the moment I'm going by eye. Oh, I haven't got my pivot function on. Okay, so that's coming down this line here. So if we open it out, you can see that you've got your seam going across like this. Okay, so it was going to take this out. I always do a little check before I cut anything at this point, just to make sure I went in the right direction and all that. Just going to cut it with my scissors. I'm going to open it out and finger press it, or rolly press it. That will make it sit nice and flat. Okay, so we've got that like that now. Got to make sure I've got my backing for my cushion there. So now I go back to the machine and I sew from where I stopped to where I started. Just overlapped it a little bit there. Ta-da! Okay, so my binding's on. Trim up anything that gets in my way. Do that with this cushion bit. So now what happens is you've got to turn this over to the back, and I usually will get the iron and press in there. Okay, and your corners will come over. I've got quite a bit of thickness here. So I push that corner down with my finger, so that's going to come over like a sort of mitre. And the one that's underneath, I'm going to pop down first, like that. And then this side, so that's sitting out nice and flat, and then this side I'll be folding over like that. So I probably should have done mine 2.5 because I've got this extra thickness in here, but if I pull that, I will be getting a nice corner like this. So that's my mitered corners. And I sew, I'll start part way down and I sew this down by hand. So I'll be sewing along here, sew along to here, fold this over. And if you catch a couple of stitches in the corners as well, that will hold it in place nicely. If you do a couple on the front as well, that will earn you brownie points at exhibitions. That's the sort of thing they look for, if you're into that sort of thing, which I'm not really.
What kind of stitch do you use when you do that?
Okay, so you want a blind hem stitch. Let me get my needle and thread and I shall show you. Oh, I need my needle threader. Where's my needle threader? I think it's in my little sewing basket over here.
While she's looking for that, we'll look outside and just enjoy the view.
Enjoy the view. It's in my little basket.
Little bit of sunshine today.
Yep.
Little wind. Same view out of the window. Sorry guys, don't have a different window to show you.
It's the same one. It's still here.
All right, the super duper needle threader.
Super duper needle threader. cutter thingy in there. This is my super duper threaded needle holder, but none of my needles are threaded at the moment. So I tend to like using quite small needles, which is why I need a needle threader. There you go, see that?
Do it
That
again.
was magic.
Do it again.
Oh, you mean I've got to make it work again?
Yeah. Gotta get close to them so they can see what you're doing.
Okay. So I'm getting my knit thread, cut it off, pop it over there so it goes down there. Take my needle, put it eye down in there, press. Yay! Threaded. So you can thread the tiniest little eyes of needles. It says on the thing what there are a few needles it doesn't work with, but you get the right shape, which is most needles. It's fine. So I'm going to, of course I'm going backwards because I'm left-handed, but there you go. Just fasten inside where I've done all my stitching, and I've matched my thread to the binding colour. So this folds over like this. What I'm going to do is come up on the edge of the binding and then go straight in underneath that edge so that I'm not travelling on the outside. All my travelling's done underneath. So come up on the edge, in there, along. Oops, break your needle. That's good. I said about tiny needles, didn't I? Where's my other one that I threaded?
You put it in it's on the corner of your thing, I think.
There it is. Okay. So in next to where you did it, up on the edge. I know I haven't fastened this, but you saw me fastening. In right next to where I did it. It's because I'm trying to show you. Up on the edge. Little stitches in right next to it, along, up on the edge. So you shouldn't see my stitches then. In there, up on the edge. This is what I like to do. I like to do this sitting on the couch watching TV, or not watching TV, listening to the TV. In there, along, up. Okay, so then you can't really see the stitches at all. I'll give you a prize if you can see them. There you go. Like that. That's basically the stitch you use if you do hand applique as well, if you're not doing the turn with your needle. And there we go. What else do you have to do to your quilts, Cal?
Give them to you to bind.
You're supposed to make a label.
Oh, make a label.
You should make a label. I wonder if I've got any quilts here with labels on. I don't know. You can use permanent marker pen, embroidery, do whatever you like to make a label for the back. And that way, in 100 years' time, when they find your quilt, they'll know who made it and you'll be part of history. So there you go. So I just want to say thanks for everybody for coming along and joining in the class. I hope you really enjoy making your quilts. Do take a look at my blog, which is mysteryquilter.com. If you're on Instagram, you can follow me. I'm at Mystery Quilter. And the reason for the Mystery Quilter is because I do a lot of mystery quilts. So we run them from the shop at Quilter's Lane. But I also work with Kim at Cotton Cuts in America and Lisa at Modern Quilt Club. I'll put all the details in your notes. And they do their pre-cut mysteries that I design. And you can make those mystery quilts, which are really fun. I know quite a few of you have done them before, so do enjoy doing those. If you're into doing the triangles, we're doing another session on Thursday. I'm not quite sure what time yet because I have a webinar I've got to take part in the morning. So I'll set the time for doing something on the triangles on Thursday. Otherwise, thank you very much for coming along, and see you online soon or in the shop.
Bye, all.
Bye.